Good morning and welcome to this case study video for Greening the City. This video will talk about Paris in France and we'll look at the co-location of urban greening and its benefits. One of the interesting things to think about when we talk about Paris is the way in which the city has been redeveloped over time, particularly from the 1850s onwards with George Eugene Haussmann and the redevelopment of Paris with its grand boulevards, with its infrastructure of large city parks and the use of the river as well. So what you have in Paris is a blending of the old and the new, of the contemporary with the more traditional, and the promotion of an outdoor lifestyle and a high quality of livability that uses the landscape and uses urban greening as a fundamental part of that infrastructure. And there are a number of examples across the city where you've got high quality investment in green infrastructure in form of street trees, in form of the animation of canals, or even in terms of the false nature of fake urban green outside the Galeries Lafayette, for instance. And one thing that is very clear in Paris, especially when you walk around, is that the quantity of green infrastructure which is visible throughout the city is quite high. And although the quality might vary, as you would see in most cities in Europe and in most cities around the world, there is a continuity of the provision of trees, of small pocket parks, and of the use of greening to improve the street scene and to improve the legibility between different buildings, different areas, and to stop the roads sort of migrating into each other. And so when we talk about Paris, we can look at the legacy of Haussmann and the way in which his ideas of the Grand Boulevard Champs-Élysées, the avenues of trees, the Jardin de Luxembourg, for instance, had set the parameters of what people think about as Paris with this city of light moniker. But also there's a lot more contemporary approaches to green infrastructure with a lot more community scale greening in terms of the Jardin Villemin, for instance, but also the more recent participatory budget where the Mayor of Paris set an agenda whereby local people could nominate projects that they felt would be valuable to improve the quality of life of the city. And a lot of those projects were urban greening projects. They were renovation work, they were improvements in the urban greening of the city to try and ensure that that particular neighbourhoods had a high quality environment and that could then support the people who lived there. And so although Paris does have this large-scale footprint of green infrastructure with the two urban forests, the Bois de Vincennes, the Bois de Boulogne in the east and the west, and the River Seine and the Canal Saint-Martin running through the city. There are variations in terms of the amount of GI in each area. And so the fact that the city is attempting to provide a greater level of equity around the quality and quantity is quite an interesting step forward. And part of this is this historical legacy where you see the reuse and the retrofitting of green infrastructure into existing areas of the city. So the Promenade Plantée near the Gare de Lyon in the centre of the city, near the Bastille, has reused former rail yard infrastructure to create an urban greenway. And this is the predecessor to the High Line in New York and the Atlantic Beltline. And so you've got this reuse and repurposing of urban infrastructure for a greening and an ecological purpose. And one of the good things about this project is that it does intersect through different houses. So you actually start to see the fact that the GI is working with the physical environment and people can interact with it on a daily basis. In addition, you have something like the Parc André Citroën, so the former car manufacturing factory, which has been turned into quite a futuristic park with a number of different areas which are diverse in terms of their ecosystems, in terms of their species selections, and in terms of the way in which people use them. So there are large public areas that people use to in this case, have children have their lunches, but also areas for tranquility and areas for more ecological purposes. So the contemporary articulation of GI and urban greening in Paris is responding to a lot of quite interesting social, economic and ecological issues. And then of course you have some of the more classic views, so the looking south from the Sacré-Cœur church via the Square Louis Michel, where you have this very formal form of park landscape which people use to access the tourist attractions of Sacré-Cœur and Montmartre. So you actually have this more traditional use of GI as a set of framing or an introduction to a location, and people might not necessarily think about the landscape as being part of that location, but it is a place where people sit, where people have their lunch, people have a drink, so it is forming part of the experience that they're having. And if we can look about how this, and if you think about how this works across the city, we can see that there's multiple scales of green infrastructure and urban greening going on. There's different directions in terms of what sort of retrofit or new projects are being delivered and how these are reacting to specific locations. So you have the classic designs of things like the Parc des Buttes-Chaumont in the north of the city, where you've got this very classical set of sweeping paths, a lake and different environments there. That would be from the 17th and 18th century. Then you have the Bois de Boulogne and the green lung of Paris, with the motorway intersect cutting straight through it, which you can't really hear, but it does provide a space for a lot of different activities to occur at the same time. And these are really important given that the amount of traffic in Paris, and they kind of help to dissipate some of that air pollution idea. Then you've got urban renewal projects such as the Parc de la Villette in the north of the city, a former meat yard and meat packing area, which has been turned into quite a contemporary and futuristic looking site. And then things like accessible green infrastructure or inaccessible green infrastructure on the Promenade Plantée. So I think one of the things that we need to think about when we talk about Paris is the variability in the focus and the type of urban greening which is being developed, the way in which it both talks to the legacy of Haussmann and the development of the Grand Paris vision, but also how it's reacting to more contemporary issues of climate change, air pollution, and retrofit and renovation. And so although you have a continuity of landscapes across Paris, there is a variability in it that actually offers something more contemporary. I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you all again soon.